Welcome to my world.
Hej, mit navn det er Stig Ulrichsen, og welcome to my world. I denne uge har jeg fået besøg af en kvinde, der i den grad har beskæftiget sig inden for kulturens verden. Hun er til daglig museumsdirektør for ARoS i Aarhus. Et af de største flagskib, vi overhovedet har i Danmark. Det job og ARoS skal vi høre en hel del om i programmet. Hendes navn det er Rebecca Matthews. Velkommen til.
Tak.
I started up in Danish, but I think
Yes.
we have to continue in English. How much have you learned of the Danish?
I've learned quite a bit actually. I take Danish lessons. I have Danish lessons every week, and at ARoS, where I work, we have all our meetings in Danish inside the museum. But of course, we work a lot internationally, so we speak a lot of English when we're developing exhibitions and things like that. But I understand a lot of Danish, so I understood your introduction. I think there's a real difference between listening and understanding and actively speaking. I've got to get much better at that bit. So that's why I think we have to do it in English, I'm afraid, today.
So when I have you in the studio in a couple of years, you'll be speaking perfectly Danish, maybe with a little bit dialect.
With a Jutland dialect, maybe. Yeah, no, I've heard I've got a bit of a Jutland accent when I speak. Yeah, let's see. I hope. I'll keep trying.
That will be a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And before we start talking about ours and start talking about you, I would like just to, because there can be some viewers sitting and say, I have seen that lady before and I don't think it was on ours. I have seen her face somewhere.
Yeah.
And we can now tell that you were actually, I guess it was the first time you came to Denmark, 2013, around
Yes,
there?
yeah.
You came to Denmark to take care of making sure Aarhus was recognized all over the world as the culture city of the year in 2017.
That's right, yeah. I'd been to Denmark many times before because I'm married to a Dane and I know Denmark well, but that was the first time I came to work in Denmark in 2013. And yeah, my job was running the European Capital of Culture in Aarhus and actually the whole region of the central Jutland area. So it's 19 municipalities involved in that project. And our paths crossed because of the Randers connection, particularly at that time. So yeah, I was here from 13 to 18. And it was just the most amazing time, really exciting to run that project. 450 events that ran across that whole year in 2017. So it was a really exciting, really big year, I think, for Aarhus, for the region and for Denmark. So people may have seen me then.
I guess so, yeah. And it must have been a crazy job. What made you say yes to that job and of course ask for that job, I guess also, you know, because it's a lot of, you say, bolde in Danish, you had to end in the air.
Yeah, there were.
Having that running. I would have been not sleeping for 5 years myself if I had that job.
That sounds familiar. I don't think I did.
How did you feel?
It was a really busy job, and yeah, it's one of those jobs where you're constantly on alert. So I did sleep, but I was always thinking about what we needed to do. It's one of those. It's a bit like the Olympics. You kind of get announced that you've won the designation to be European Capital of Culture, and that was in 2012, I think, for Aarhus. I started in 2013, and then you have the years that build up to the year itself, so 3-4 years getting ready to deliver all of these different arts and education and social projects. So you're constantly, you know, working, and of course, people always want to know what's it going to be about, what's going to be in it, what's the year going to contain. And so there's a lot to think about in terms of communication, there's a lot to think about in terms of fundraising, there's all of the different components that you need to bring together, as well as a really exciting arts and cultural program for people. So it was a really, it was a crazy busy 5 years. Yeah, I wasn't expecting to move here and get the job, but it just happened that I did, and it's a strange story actually around that, because I was living and working in New York, and my partner Christina is from Aarhus, Aarhusiana, and when I got the job in New York, she said very clearly, we don't want to move to New York. We want to stay in Denmark. I was okay, fine. It's a long commute, but okay, we'll do that. And I remember promising her when I took the job in New York that if a job came up in Aarhus that didn't require me to speak fluent Danish, but that was running a big arts and cultural program, then of course I would go for it. And never for a second did I think that any of those things would all come together in a role. And it did, because Aarhus was designated European Capital of Culture, and then they advertised for their chief executive, and she called me and said, "There's this role, you should go for it." And I did, and luckily I got the job. So that's how it all started, really.
That's an amazing story. And we are going a little bit back later in the program, just to find out who you are, and what was bringing you to that. I wish my English was a little bit better sometimes, you know, just so I could remember all the words. So when you learn Danish for the next time,
yes,
we can maybe practice together. You learn me some better English.
You're on.
Anyway, we are going to talk.
It might be slower in Danish from my side, because I'm not so quick, but yeah.
And we are going to talk about ARoS now, because that's where you are now, and yes, you're a museumsdirektør in ARoS. And before you came there, you were director in Ebeltoft, at Class Museum in Ebeltoft. So what made you ask for the job in ARoS? What was the inspiration? What was it you thought, okay, this could be so interesting to become museumsdirektør?
Yeah, it's a great question, actually. In 2017, we had worked with ARoS on some projects. So ARoS delivered the Triennale, which was called The Garden. I don't know if people remember that, but it was this extraordinary indoor exhibition within the museum, but also externally, with many different artists from around the world. It was running along the whole kind of beach area from Tangkrogen in Aarhus. Really fantastic exhibition. So I knew ARoS well. Always thought it was an extraordinary place of really rigorous artistic quality, real immersion, exciting events, strong education program, etc. So I loved it as a museum. Never thought I would work there. And then when I came back to Denmark after I'd been in London for about 3 years, I'm sure we'll talk about that, I got the job at Glasmuseet. It's also a museum that I had worked with in 2017. I think it's a really wonderful, smaller museum, but I really kind of loved its values and its ethos, and so I was excited to work there. I love Ebeltoft as well. And then the job came up at ARoS, which I don't think many were expecting, and I saw the job profile, and I read it, and I thought, I think that I could do that job. And I think that what they might be looking for is a museum director that is more like museum directors internationally. So not just, you know, solely focused on being an artistic director or solely focused on being a curator, but a museum director who can kind of lead the whole museum. And I'm experienced in that. So I thought, well, I'll throw my hat in the ring, because I would really, really love to work at ARoS, and I would love to, you know, run that museum. And so I went through the process. It was a very detailed, rigorous recruitment process through an external agency that ARoS ran, and yeah, got the job. And, you know, it's been 2.5 years that I've been there. It's just flown by. It's incredible.
What expectations did you have for the job when you start saying, okay, this could be something for me? And has those expectations come true for you?
I think when I started in the job, ARoS had been through a pretty tough time, actually. I think the change of director was something that had, you know, was needed, and I think that the team just needed a bit more continuity and a bit of a solid start. So when I started there, I was very clear that there were 3 things I really wanted to do. I wanted to settle down the team and kind of create this very calm culture of ambition. I wanted to create new vision for the museum for the 10 years into the future, kind of a longer term vision. And I really wanted to focus on starting to build, to deliver the next level, which is the massive new expansion project, which will open next year. And that was a project that had been talked about and developed by previous directors for many years. And I wanted to take that off the drawing board and into reality and kind of make it happen. That was, I think, my part of the kind of job, the responsibility. So those are the things I was really focused on. And 2.5 years in, they seem to all be going okay. I think, you know, when you start in these jobs, you want to make your mark. and you want to kind of put your fingerprints on something, you know, you've been chosen to do that job for a certain reason. I'm also really aware that that we are custodians of institutions. You know, we're stewards of them for a moment in time. You look after an institution, you look after a museum at a moment in time, and your job is to tell its story and tell its history at that moment. So how do you build success on success? What do you do that can really identify areas that it can develop in? And so that was exciting, and I think that's one of the things that the new vision really does try and take forward for the museum. So all those things come into consideration. Those were, I think, my expectations.
Yeah. And then you have been working hard for 2.5 years, you told me, together with a lot of people in ARoS, who's, you know, it's not only a one-woman job, it's a many persons job. Yeah. and for the viewers who have never been to ARoS, in a few words, what is it you can expect to see when you decide to go to ARoS to visit it? What is it you can see? Because it's not only just one thing, it's so many things. When I was doing research for our interview, I was really surprised of how many things you have.
Yeah, it's a big museum. It's one of the biggest museums in Northern Europe. I think it's 20,700 square meters of art and experience and creativity and fun and entertainment. So we have 10 levels at ARoS, and at any one time at least 5 or 6 exhibitions that people can come and see, and those are exhibitions of artists that are Danish artists or international artists, artists that are contemporary now, you know, alive and working today, or artists from the past. So you can get a sense of the history of art as well. A really wonderful collection at ARoS of Danish Golden Age paintings, Danish historical art and art history. It's a great way to kind of delve yourself into the artistic world. But of course, museums today are not just about the art. The art sits at the centre, but the other things that are important are how we talk about the art, how we frame art and art history, events where we have artists and writers and filmmakers and coming to talk about what they do so people can have an understanding of context. I think always that when you have those kind of public engagement conversations with artists, you start to think about what their art is about, but also what it means in the context of where we are today, socially, politically, environmentally. Outside of all of those things, there's also a really fantastic museum shop. There's a cafe, there's a restaurant, there's an orangerie. So ARoS is a place where you can come and see art, but you can also relax, you can read a book, you can shop, you can have something very nice to eat, a very good cup of coffee. So it's a place, I think, of meeting and encounter. And I like to think of it as a place where everyone is welcome. So whatever your level of interest or knowledge in art or art history or live art, there's an opportunity just to come and have a nice time and to meet and be with friends, or to bring your children, or to come with your family. So it's a really, I think, a whole experience at ARoS.
And you have a lot of exhibitions. How long do they run, those exhibitions? Is that different from exhibition to exhibition, or is it the same amount of time it runs? It
depends, actually. So we have on levels 8 and 6, there are collection exhibitions. So those are the works that ARoS has bought and acquired over the years. So they're permanent exhibitions that you can see over a period of time. They stay there. They're actually going to be changing in 2026 into new exhibitions, but they're collection exhibitions. So you can see those for long periods of time. And then we have changing exhibitions on other levels. On level 5, which is where our very big gallery is, at the moment we have an exhibition by the Danish artist Richard Mortensen, which really is a very beautiful survey exhibition, a sweep through his work across all of his years of practice. It's a really wonderful exhibition where we've had lots of loans into that exhibition from many different museums across Denmark. So that will run for about 4 or 5 months. That opened at the end of March, and it finishes in early September. And that tends to be, on those temporary exhibitions, how long things run for, 4 or 5 months. And then, of course, we have the permanent Olafur Eliasson Rainbow, which sits atop the museum. This is a kind of extraordinary panoramic coloured view of the city. You can walk right the way around it, 360 degrees, and see Aarhus I think, one of the best views of Aarhus from every angle. And then in the basement, we also have a kind of permanent set of installations by artists, and they run all year round the whole time. So it depends on whether it's a temporary exhibition or one of our longer term.
And I guess when it's so big, you know, people can come there many times and still have not seen everything, you know, so they can come back.
Yep, they can.
Is it like you can buy a ticket that can hold a whole year, like you can someplace, so you can go there every time you want?
Yeah, you can.
Yes.
You can buy a membership, and that means you can come back as much as you want, as many times as you want in a year. You also get discount in the shop, and you get discount in the cafe if you have an annual membership. And actually, one of the things we've seen, particularly in the past year or so, is people buying more and more memberships, because, you know, you're right, you can't get round 10 flights of exhibitions in an afternoon. So you might want to come and just see one, go away, go home, come back a week or two later and experience something else. We also have a special membership card for people who are under 30. So there's no way I could buy that, way past that, but it's really important for us, for young people, to come in. And that's called ARoS Tralva. But of course, it's free for people up to 18 to come into the museum at any time.
You were also talking about this new big project that was on the top of your desk. Yes. And you took it up and made it real. And it's coming up very soon. And what can you tell a little bit about that? Yeah,
of course. It's a big expansion at ARoS, about 20% more museum actually in total. And if anyone knows ARoS, it's the front part of ARoS that leads towards where the Operahuset is, where the City Hall is. And in that expansion, we have a new underground gallery. It's about 1,000 square meters. Above that, we have an open air art square, which is where we're going to show really exciting performance and live art and sculpture, etc. And that will also be the main entrance into ARoS again. But as you enter the underground gallery, you'll come into that from level 3. You will also follow a corridor which takes you kind of past that gallery and slowly takes you down further underground, and that leads you into a really remarkable new artwork by James Turrell, who's an American artist, which is called The Dome. It's one of his sky spaces, and this is a really monumental work that you enter into and you can sit inside, and it is about 40 meters in diameter. It's about 18 meters high, and at the very top of the dome, if you imagine like the Pantheon in Rome, not quite the same proportions, but if you imagine that kind of shape, there is an opening or an aperture. It's about 6 meters wide, which gives onto the sky. So you're sitting in this dome on these benches, looking up at the sky through this opening. And on the inside of the dome, James Turrell has programmed this remarkable changing spectrum of different coloured light. And as you're there experiencing this and looking at the sky, there's something very special that happens to your eye, so that the sky almost changes colour. The most important moments to experience the sky space is at dawn or at dusk, when the sun is coming up or when the sun is setting, because you get this remarkable colour play in this very kind of spiritual, quiet space. And it's a really very special experience, and that's coming, and all of it will open in June 2025.
That's a big vision, I think. You know, visions, are they important running a museum? Because very often people from outside look at it and say, museum, well, nothing really happens, you know, it's very steady, you know, nothing really happens. Yeah. But it's important to have those visions about doing something spectacular. You know, what can I do in the future? Is that important to have those visions?
I think it is. I think one of the things that's been really special about ARoS is that it has been a museum that's been in constant evolution. So, and it moved into the new museum space that was built for it by Smit-Hammer Lassen in 2004, the space on ARoS LA. And then in 2011 it added the Rainbow, which is pretty visionary. You know, that extraordinary work atop the museum by Olafur Eliasson.
I bet you go, instead of running in the morning, you just go up there and you come, and then you walk around for an hour and then go down work. Is that correct?
I don't get to walk around it for an hour. I do walk around it most days, and I do walk around the museum most days. And of course, because we have 10 floors, we have all of these stairs running right the way through.
You don't need fitness and
I don't
like
need
that.
any fitness. I do actually, but
oh, sorry.
I do walk around.
But let's come back to the question.
Yeah, no,
sorry for the interruption.
Right. It's a good point. It's a good way to get fit. Then the rainbow came in 2011, and now I think the kind of next stage in the evolution is the next level, the James Turrell Sky Space, the new galleries, the new art square. That's been a visionary drive in ARoS. So it has kept moving forward. It isn't a museum that kind of stops still and doesn't really move itself. And that's one of the things I've always really loved about it. The other thing is part of the vision that I've had, this kind of 10-year vision for the museum, has been to look at, what is the museum in the first 5 years up to and including the next level, and then what does the museum look and feel like in the 5 years after that? It will be very different. It'll be a different experience for people, a new and interesting experience for people, because we want to keep being, artistically adventurous. It's very important to me that we're culturally inclusive, that wherever you're from, whatever your background or your culture or your religion or your language, or that you can come and feel welcome and find that there's something for you in that museum. There's some space for you in it. There's also, museums have to constantly be thinking about financial sustainability, environmental sustainability in what we're doing. And it's really important that we are pushing all the time to be locally grounded, but also nationally and internationally connected. So all of those things are kind of playing into the vision to kind of keep pushing forward. And I think if you stop having visions and stop having ambitions for where you want to go, you do kind of flatline. And that's one thing I don't think that ARoS has done or will do. It really does want to keep moving forward. And it wants to do that for artists and for audiences. And those are the two main, interplayers, if you like, in our world.
And now we have to go a little bit away from ours. We're talking about ours, but time is flying, and I promised the viewers that we will also talk a little bit more about you, because where are you from? Where, and how did the interest for culture, and art start for you? Was that later in life, or was it already back when you were a young girl? Running around and playing football or whatever.
Yeah, no, I didn't play football.
But
I played. What did I play? I played hockey and netball, and at school really. I grew up in a part of England, which is. I grew up in the countryside near Newbury in Berkshire, which is about an hour from London, in the southeast of England, and about, closest big city that most people would know would be Oxford, probably. It's on the kind of Oxfordshire-Berkshire border. And I, from school days, I was always loving to be involved in arts and culture. And I sang in the choir at school, and I did a bit of school acting, those kind of things. Not very well, but I had a go. So I was kind of involved in most of those things in school. And I think very early on, I had a sense of the importance of culture to bring people together. I mean, one of the things I really loved was singing in a choir. I think there's an extraordinary experience in voices coming together. I wasn't a very good singer, but that doesn't matter. It's about the experience, I think. And then growing up, I was very interested in art, visual art particularly, but also dance. And I mean, I didn't live somewhere where there was a gallery, so I would go to London or I'd go to Oxford to see exhibitions. And I think I just carried that with me, through my life. And then it became my career. I was very clear, I think, early on, that I wanted to work in the arts. I remember my mum saying, you should get a job, vocational job, become a lawyer or do something like that. And I'd probably earn a lot more money if I'd done that. But I never wanted to. I was really clear that I wanted to work in arts and culture in some way, and that's what I've done.
How did you manage to get into your favorite job, your dream job? How did you manage to get a career into the art? Did you have to do something special, Did you go to art school, or did you just go directly to become the management in some levels?
Oh no, it's not that easy. If only it had been that easy. No, I studied my first degree, and then I did a postgraduate. Was at Cambridge, and I read modern and medieval languages. So language and literature, but not not necessarily in the art world. And then I went to London, and I really wanted to work in the arts. It was impossible to get a job. And I remember the Arts Council of England advertising for, it was like an assistant at the London International Festival of Theatre. They called it an assistant. It was kind of like a dog's body, really. And I interviewed for that, and I didn't get that job, but they did come to me and say, would you like to come and work at the Lift Festival, and we'll pay you, I think it was £30 a week, and you'll just get to do everything in the office. And it was a little office in Covent Garden, and it was run by these two really great women who became, you know, very well known for programming exciting artistic work. They were called Rose Devenne Fenton and Lucy Neal, and I worked for them. And I watched how you ran a festival from the ground up. Most of the time I made the coffee, and I put the slides out for the press, and I did the photocopying, but I actually just watched and listened and learned. It was extraordinary. But I had no money. I couldn't afford a ticket. I walked everywhere in London. I ate a baked potato every night because it was all I could afford, and I slept on my friends' sofas. But it was the most brilliant time in a way, because I was kind of doing something I really loved, and I was learning all the time. And then after a couple of years in London, I worked in advertising for a bit. I decided I wanted to do a second master's, and I went to the Courtauld. And the Courtauld Institute of Art is part of London University. It specialises in art history. And I did a master's there in German Expressionism under a really amazing woman called Dr. Shulamit Bär. And I just fell in love with the visual arts completely. I always had been, but really, and I was so determined then that I wanted to work in the visual arts, and then it kind of took off from there, really.
Yeah, and one day you ended up in Aarhus, Denmark.
We
are getting close to the end, but I knew the viewers are always interested in to hear when people come from outside Denmark. But now we are from Østjylland, so it's of course your first meeting with Østjylland and Aarhus. What surprised you when you arrived in Denmark, and what did you like most coming to Denmark and work back then in the days 2012-13?
Okay, yeah, well, I knew Denmark a little bit from my family.
You've been here before, yeah.
But it's very different, I think, knowing it personally through family, and then learning to, or getting to know Denmark in a work environment. It's very different. I mean, I've always loved Aarhus. I love it more than Copenhagen, and that's honestly true. When I go to Copenhagen for work, which I do a lot, I come home and I'm like, oh, I'm so glad to be back. I feel very settled here. I feel like I've been, you know, really, it's my adopted home city, home country. I love Denmark. I think it's an extraordinary, extraordinary place. I feel very lucky to live here, actually. What do I know about it? As an outsider, you can kind of look in, I think, and I think that there is a fairness and a trust here in Denmark that you don't see or experience in many other countries. I remember in 2017 when we were negotiating different projects, and I was working only with Danes, and I would say, okay, well, let's do a contract on that, let's get it signed, and they were like, no, we can just shake hands on that. And I remember thinking that was really remarkable. The other thing I learnt is the importance of consultation. You know, I come from a country in the UK, and also when I worked in America, in New York, that's quite hierarchical, where, you know, you make a decision as the boss or whatever, and it just happens. Whereas what I love about Denmark is this kind of melange of voices, this contribution from everyone, this consultation, and that's really true about here. It's not something that you just kind of hear and actually it's just a myth. It's really true. And I love the Danish people. The only thing is I just wish I could speak the language better.
Well, 2 or 3 years from now,
there you go.
You come back again.
I will.
And we speak Danish.
Yes.
And I speak a little bit better English if you learn. What do you call
English
it?
is perfect. Very good.
But anyway, Rebecca, thank you very much for coming by and tell us a little bit about you and ARoS and what we can expect in the future.
Thanks for having me.
And now I can talk Danish. Ja, jeg kan tale dansk, og det er jo dejligt, når man ikke er specielt god til engelsk. Det kan jeg lige så godt indrømme, det har jeg sikkert lagt en mærke til. Jeg vil gerne sige tusind tak, fordi I valgte at kigge med. Og jeg håber at se jer alle sammen tilbage igen i næste program.
Welcome to my world. Won't you come on in?